Deep in the dense, suffocating embrace of the Cambodian jungle, colossal stone faces smile with serene indifference as strangler figs tear their temples apart. For centuries, European explorers who stumbled upon these ruins believed they were the work of gods or giants, unable to comprehend how a civilization capable of such architectural majesty could simply vanish. Yet the true architect of this sprawling metropolis was not divine intervention, but a masterful, almost hubristic manipulation of the natural world. The ruins belong to Angkor, the beating heart of the Khmer Empire, a realm that once dominated Southeast Asia. The secret to their unprecedented rise and the catalyst for their catastrophic fall was not forged in iron or gold, but written in the flow of water. At its zenith, in the 12th and 13th centuries, this capital city was a sprawling urban leviathan, supporting a population approaching 1 million inhabitants. During an era when London was a muddy town of perhaps 30,000, the Khmer capital was a marvel of urban planning, stretching across an area roughly the size of modern Los Angeles. The lifeblood of this vast settlement was the monsoon, a seasonal deluge that brought both life and destruction to the region. To survive and thrive in this volatile environment, the engineers of the era conceived a hydraulic system of staggering complexity and scale. This was no mere collection of ditches and wells, but a monumental terraforming project that fundamentally altered the geography of the floodplain. At the core of this network were the barays, colossal rectangular reservoirs carved into the earth with mathematical precision. The largest of these, the West Baray, measures nearly 5 miles long and over a mile wide, an artificial lake so vast it defies belief that it was excavated entirely by human hands. These immense basins were designed to capture the torrential rains of the wet season, storing millions of cubic meters of water. Through an intricate web of canals, embankments, and spillways, the stored water was meticulously distributed during the dry months. This engineering triumph liberated the civilization from the tyrannical whims of the seasons, allowing farmers to cultivate 3 or even 4 rice crops a single year. Granaries overflowed, supporting a massive labor force of artisans, builders, and priests. The abundance of food fueled an era of unparalleled monumental construction, giving rise to architectural masterpieces that still command reverence today. The mastery of the monsoon was not merely a utilitarian endeavor, but a profound expression of spiritual ideology. The aquatic infrastructure was designed to mirror the Hindu cosmos, with the great reservoirs representing the mythical oceans surrounding Mount Meru, the home of the gods. At the physical and spiritual center of this engineered universe stood Angkor Wat, a breathtaking temple complex surrounded by a massive moat that served both symbolic and practical functions. The earthly ruler derived his divine legitimacy from his ability to control the life-giving waters, ensuring the prosperity of his subjects. The reflection of the heavens in those still, artificial lakes projected an aura of invincible permanence. For centuries, the delicate balance held, and the realm expanded its borders, its influence radiating outward across the Indo-Chinese peninsula. The intricate aquatic network became the invisible skeletal structure of the empire, dictating where cities could be built, how armies could be provisioned, and how wealth could be accumulated. Yet the very brilliance of this design harbored a fatal flaw, an inherent fragility that would only reveal itself when the skies began to change. The turning point arrived stealthily, carried on the shifting currents of a global phenomenon. Tree ring data extracted from ancient Vietnamese cypresses has unveiled a dramatic shift in the medieval climate system. As the 13th century bled into the 14th, the predictable rhythm of the monsoons, the steady heartbeat of the region, began to falter. The world was transitioning from the medieval climate anomaly into the Little Ice Age, and the effects on the tropical weather patterns of Southeast Asia were profoundly destabilizing. Decades of intense, unrelenting drought descended upon the landscape. The mighty reservoirs, designed to hold back seas of water, slowly transformed into cracked, sun-baked plains. The meticulously engineered canals choked with silt and invasive vegetation, while the water table plummeted beneath the roots of the desperate rice crops. The agricultural engine that fed 1 million mouths began to sputter and fail, sending shockwaves of famine and instability through the densely packed urban centers. The architects and laborers desperately attempted to adapt, modifying their ancient network to capture whatever meager rainfall occurred. Spillways were altered, new channels were hastily dug, and massive stone blocks were repurposed to dam failing rivers. But a system built for predictable abundance cannot easily be retrofitted for chronic scarcity. The immense scale of their creation, once their greatest asset, became an unmanageable liability. The sprawling metropolis was simply too vast, too deeply dependent on a specific climatic reality to survive its absence. Then, the skies unleashed a cruelty far worse than the drought. The prolonged dry spells were suddenly punctuated by years of apocalyptic monsoon rains, storms of a magnitude the region had not seen in centuries. The parched, deforested landscape, stripped of its natural ability to absorb moisture, shed the deluge in terrifying flash floods. Torrents of water roared through the fragile, neglected canal system, tearing away earthworks and shattering the delicate stone sluice gates. The hydraulic network was violently overwhelmed. Archaeological excavations have revealed massive breaches in the embankments of the Great Barays, where the sheer force of the floodwaters ripped away tons of earth and stone. The intricate distribution channels, choked with debris from the floods, became stagnant swamps, breeding grounds for disease. The cosmic order, so carefully mirrored in the architecture of the city, was physically and symbolically shattered by the chaotic fury of the natural world. As the waters raged and the crops failed, the divine authority of the rulers evaporated. If the sovereign could no longer command the monsoon, his mandate from heaven was broken. Internal strife fractured the political elite, while the starving populace grew increasingly desperate. The once impenetrable capital, weakened by famine and disease, became vulnerable to external threats. Neighboring kingdoms, sensing the vulnerability of the wounded giant, launched devastating raids, further accelerating the downward spiral of the civilization. The evacuation was not a sudden, dramatic exodus, but a slow, agonizing bleeding of life from the urban core. Over the course of the 15th century, families packed their meager belongings and migrated toward the coast, seeking new livelihoods in maritime trade. The grand avenues emptied, the bustling markets fell silent, and the monumental temples were left to the encroaching jungle. The elaborate waterworks, requiring constant maintenance by thousands of hands, were abandoned to the relentless forces of entropy. The shadow of that forgotten empire still loomed, even as its physical presence dissolved into the forest. The story of its demise was long misunderstood, attributed solely to foreign invasions or mysterious plagues. It is only in recent decades, through the marriage of advanced remote sensing technology and painstaking paleoclimatology, that the true narrative has been unearthed. The silent ruins spoke of forgotten power, yes, but also of a profound vulnerability to the shifting moods of the planet. Laser mapping technology, known as LiDAR, has peeled back the dense canopy of the modern jungle, revealing the true, staggering extent of the ancient terraforming. Billions of data points have painted a ghost map of the vanished metropolis, exposing thousands of previously unknown ponds, hidden canals, and the precise locations where the infrastructure catastrophically failed. This digital resurrection has fundamentally altered our understanding of how the inhabitants interacted with their environment. These aerial surveys demonstrate that the city was not merely a collection of isolated temples, but a vast, interconnected machine. Every square kilometer of the landscape was modified to capture, store, or redirect water. The LiDAR data reveals the immense hubris of the endeavor, a civilization attempting to force an incredibly dynamic, monsoon-driven environment into a state of permanent engineered stasis. They sought to conquer nature, and for several glorious centuries, they succeeded. This success bred an inescapable trap. As the population swelled, the infrastructure had to expand, requiring more land to be cleared of forest, which in turn altered the local microclimate, making rainfall even more erratic. The system became so massive, so complex, and so tightly coupled that a failure in one sector cascaded through the entire network. The engineers had built a masterpiece of survival that was entirely intolerant of extreme climatic deviation. We can only imagine the despair of the final generations who walked those drying canals. The farmers watching the skies for clouds that never came, the priests chanting desperate mantras to deaf gods, the laborers hauling sandbags to patch crumbling dikes under the torrential, destructive rains. Their struggle was not against a foreign army, but against the very earth they had sought to master. The tragedy of their situation lies in their profound ingenuity, for they were trapped by the brilliance of their own creation. Today, the Great West Baray still holds water, a singular, massive mirror reflecting the Cambodian sky, a lonely remnant of a drowned world. The rest of the network is a dry, intricate scar etched into the earth. The tourists who flock to marvel at the stone carvings of Angkor Wat rarely perceive the invisible ghost city that surrounds them, the vast grid of vanished waterways that made the stone temples possible. This localized apocalypse stands as a stark testament to the fragility of complex societies. The Khmer were not ignorant or primitive, but the premier hydrological engineers of the pre-industrial world. Their mathematical precision, their organizational capacity, and their understanding of fluid dynamics were unparalleled in their era. Yet all their knowledge and labor were ultimately insufficient to withstand the sheer chaotic power of a changing climate. The narrative of their fall forces a re-evaluation of how we view historical collapse. It was not a singular event, a single dramatic day of fire and sword, but a slow, grinding failure of critical infrastructure over decades. It was a death by 1,000 unpatched leaks, a gradual realization that the environment had shifted beyond the operating parameters of their civilization. The end came not with a roar, but with the slow drying of the earth. The legacy of their water management still influences the region today. Modern rice farmers in the area sometimes unknowingly utilize the degraded remnants of the ancient canals, tracing the pathways laid down by engineers a millennium ago. The ghosts of the empire continue to shape the agricultural reality of the land, a silent testament to the durability of their initial vision, even if the empire itself could not endure. There is a profound irony in their demise. The very system designed to insulate the population from the unpredictability of nature became the instrument of their vulnerability. By creating a highly optimized artificial environment, they lost the resilience required to survive natural extremes. They traded flexibility for maximum efficiency, a bargain that paid incredible dividends during stable centuries but proved fatal when the climate became volatile. The rise and fall of the Khmer Empire, tied to its sophisticated yet fragile hydraulic system, remains one of history's most compelling cautionary tales. It is a story written in laterite and sandstone, in dried mud and ancient pollen. It reminds us that no civilization, regardless of its technological prowess or monumental achievements, is truly separate from the natural world that sustains it. The mastery of the elements is always, ultimately, an illusion. As the jungle reclaims the last of the forgotten reservoirs, the stone faces of the temples continue their silent vigil. They watch over a landscape that was shaped by human ambition, broken by climatic fury, and finally absorbed back into the wild. The echoes of their grand endeavor whisper through the rustling leaves, a profound and enduring enigma buried deep within the archive of human history, waiting for those willing to listen to the lessons of the lost.